Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the Morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
You reject all comparisons between Donald J. Trump and Jesus Christ.
I reject comparisons between Jesus Christ and anyone. I think it's fine to pray for God's protection over troops, but you also have to pray for God's protection over people who are, getting bombed.
When you hear Pete Hegseth saying, we will fight against those who deserve no mercy, what's your reaction to that?
Shockingly unchristian. Everyone deserves mercy. But to say that people don't deserve mercy is as about unchristian as you could get.
We're hearing a lot about Christian nationalism.
It is, and in some cases, being weaponized, I think. It is being used to sort of justify violence. So this is the opposite of Jesus' message. It's a kind of perversion of the Gospels to say that there's an us and them.
Do you think Catholic voters in the U.S. are turning against Trump because of recent developments? Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Zateo Town Hall. We are talking about the Pope versus President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, or is there no versus? A lot of things I want to ask about this big row with the Catholic Church and this big debate over just war theory and the weaponization of Christianity. I thought who better to talk to than Reverend James Martin, who is very well connected in the Catholic Church and is also, I should add, author of the new book, New York Times bestseller, Work in Progress, Confessions of a Busboy, Dishwasher, Caddy, Usher, Factory Worker, Bank Teller, Corporate Tool, and Priest. What a title, Reverend Martin. What a title.
Well, thanks. The subtitle is a bit of an ad for the book, so thanks for reading the whole subtitle.
Happy to do it. We'll talk about the book in a moment. Just initially, first off, and we've got Zateo subscribers joining us in the chat slowly as we start. But we've been told now that there's no row between the Pope and Donald Trump. The Pope made a statement saying, I'm not out to criticize Donald Trump. J.D. Vance jumped on the statement, said it's all manufactured by the media. Was this all manufactured by the media? There's no division? There's no difference of view?
Well, I think if there's a row, it's a kind of one-sided row. President Trump started off with that Truth Social post saying that the Pope was a woke Pope and didn't understand foreign policy and was soft on crime and whatnot. For a little context, that same night, there was an interview with 3 American cardinals on 60 Minutes, and he probably saw that. The timing was pretty unusual, and they critiqued him for the war not being just, and so I think that probably set him off against the Pope.
Yeah, and just on the Pope, Pope Leo, American Pope, first American Pope from Chicago, is seen as a progressive by the right. Obviously succeeding Pope Francis, who was also seen as a lefty Pope. Is he a woke Pope?
No, I don't think that's the way to describe him. I think those left and right terms, and I understand what you mean, those are mostly political terms that are kind of imported into the church. He's basically preaching the gospel. That's what he's doing. He's talking about caring for the stranger and the migrant and the poor and the sick and being against violence. So these are gospel values, not political values.
Is it fair to say that pretty much every pope in the modern era has been anti-war?
Yes. Absolutely. You go all the way back to John the 23rd with his encyclical Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth. Pope John Paul II opposed the Iraq War. Benedict has come out against war. Yeah, I mean, the line from John Paul is war is always a defeat for humanity. And they're not just against war. They're also, trying to support those who are disproportionately affected by war, which would be the poor.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair statement.
To those of you just joining the chat in the town hall, do please leave your questions in the Q&A. I will try and ask some of your questions about all of this to Reverend Martin in a moment. just focusing on the war issue, it's funny you mentioned John Paul II and Gulf War One. I mean, George H.W. Bush did not attack the Pope in response. And I think that's the key point here, that popes have come out against previous American wars, illegal wars, horrible conflicts. But the reaction for the American Pope president has not been to lash out. Of course, we have a man-child in the White House who only knows how to lash out. I mean, I don't think, I've heard Donald Trump say a lot of hilariously weird things, but saying the Pope is weak on crime was one I will always remember. That was a bizarre thing to say. And then he said the Pope wants Iran to have nuclear weapons. When you hear stuff like that, as a Catholic priest and an American citizen voter, what's your reaction?
Well, you're right. It is bizarre. It's appalling on several levels. First of all, to attack someone who is as good and prayerful and kind as Robert Prevost is, just the human being, is strange. To attack the head of the Catholic Church as someone who doesn't understand foreign affairs. I always like to remind people the Catholic Church has been dealing with political leaders and military leaders since at least the time of Charlemagne, right? So they understand foreign affairs pretty well. And third, you would think that he would not want to offend the Catholic voter in the United States. So it's strange in many ways. And Catholics that I spoke with, from progressive to traditional, found it really shocking.
Well, a majority of Catholic American voters voted for Donald Trump in 2024, as far as I'm aware. So there is an interesting, fallout from that politically. Just sticking with the war issue, is it, you said earlier it's kind of one way, and clearly the abuse and the anger and the lashing out is one way. But clearly Pope Leo is doing a bit of politics here. This is not all just random homilies and prayers. I'll give you one example. I saw Pete Hegseth do a press conference where he made his usual hawkish nonsense, God bless America, troops, kill them all, blah, 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 I'm paraphrasing. And within moments, there was a tweet from Pope Leo saying God doesn't support war, doesn't pick a side. You're saying that's not a reaction to what he's hearing from the American government? He's not responding?
I'm saying that he's not being political or partisan. He's not saying Pete Hegseth is wrong. He's not saying vote Democrat or Republican.
Well, he's clarifying. He's correcting the American government, saying God is not on your side or on the side of prosecuting this war.
I don't know. I don't know what's going through Pope Leo's mind. I think also we have to remember that he's speaking very broadly. He may have been, I'm not sure. But he said in particular, when he was, being asked by this, on the trip to Africa recently, that, a lot of these homilies and statements that were read by him in Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea and Angola had been written months beforehand. So he's talking about war in general. He's talking about those who would use God's name in general. Yeah, it must be in the back of his mind, but he really tries hard not to be specific.
Okay, well, you've been specific. You challenged Pete Hegseth and others who have claimed that God is on our side, basically, in this war. God bless our troops. And you said it's making a false God in our image, a God who despises Iranians.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, if you say God is on our side only, that means that God is, by definition, against the other person, right? I think it's fine to pray for God's protection over troops, but you also have to pray for God's protection over people who are, getting bombed. Right. So, one theologian said a couple of years ago, I guess decades ago, the problem is not that God does not, want to be on someone's side or support us. The problem is that we're compromised. And then when we say God is on our side, we are saying that God is blessing everything that we do. So I really object to those kinds of statements.
How much did you object to the Vice President of the United States, who's been Catholic for like 6 minutes, saying the Pope should be careful when he talks about theology and just war theory?
Yeah, I object a lot, but not because he's a recent convert. I mean, there are recent converts that are very wise and, are learned and maybe have PhDs in theology and in just war theory. But to tell Robert Francis Prevost, who's been an Augustinian priest for his whole life, that he doesn't understand the concept of just war that originated with St. Augustine. By the way, while Pope Leo was at the birthplace of St. Augustine, in Hippo, is really shocking. And also, this is someone who has a master's degree in divinity. He has a doctorate in canon law from a pontifical university in Rome. This guy knows a lot of theology. So it was a very strange comment, no matter who said it.
I mean, there's an arrogance to J.D. Vance that clearly came out in that thing. They're so used to lecturing the liberal media and lecturing the Democrats and telling everyone to mind what they say, that they thought they could extend it to the Pope. What do you make? I know you're not an expert on just war theory, but you're a smart guy. You're very qualified. You're a Catholic priest. You know the Catholic Church. You know Pope Leo and where he's coming from. Is the war in Iran a just war? Most people would say no.
No, it's not. There are certain sort of requirements for a just war. As you say, I'm not a moral theologian, but those are last resort, proportionate response, not injuring civilians. There's all sorts of things that are in the Catholic tradition. And you have people from Archbishop Timothy Broglio, who was the former head of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, and also the head of what we call the military vicariate, meaning he's in charge of kind of pastoral care for soldiers, saying it's not a just war. He would probably be considered someone more traditional. To someone like the Archbishop of Washington, Cardinal McElroy, who is a doctorate in political science and theology, also saying it's not a just war. So, I mean, there's widespread agreement in the Catholic Church in an unusually sort of capacious way that this is not a just war.
In your view, when was the last time the United States fought a just war?
I don't know. Again, I'm not a moral theologian. I'm not sure.
Do you think, just take an example, the war in Iraq is a classic unpopular war. That wasn't a just war either, was it? That was our last resort.
I'm going to be clear. I don't know enough about just war theory to make those kinds of decisions.
Okay, let's take some questions from our audience who are sitting patient. One of our attendees says, the hubris of people like J.D. Vance. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris had said something similar? I think that's a very fair point. John Dill asks, Reverend Martin, how do you view the current situation in Iran and Gaza through the Ignatian lens of finding God in all things?
Oh, my gosh. So for those who don't know, St. Ignatius Loyola was the founder of the Jesuits, and Ignatian spirituality can be summarized by finding God in all things. You know, I would say that if we're finding God in all things, we have to find God in all people. And to find God in all people means to care for the welfare of people in Iran and in Gaza, as well as in Israel, as well as in the United States. So it's understanding the human dignity of all people. So I would say that's an Ignatian perspective.
Kevin Morford says there's a limited right of nations to use military force for self-defense, but it is subject to several restrictions, including proportionality, necessity. It is international law that is enforceable in the context of the use of military force and not Catholic just war doctrine. What can you tell us about the requirements of proportionality and necessity in Catholic just war doctrine?
Oh, my gosh. Very little, because I'm not a moral theologian. I'll be blunt. That's outside of my expertise.
Why do you think, someone else asked, why does this administration, sorry, I'm struggling with this, why go against Pope Leo in such a way when Pope Francis was much more stronger and forceful in his anti-war, pro-peace rhetoric? He was stronger in his criticism of immigration rhetoric from Trump as well. Good memory.
I think because most likely President Trump and Vice President Vance realized that Pope Leo can't be dismissed as someone who doesn't understand the United States, which you could do under Pope Francis and was done under Pope Francis and even under Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul. Well, he doesn't understand the U.S. And so I think that any critique or perceived critiques of the war really stings them because they know that people look at him as someone who knows what he's talking about.
Yes, and one of our attendees says, "Is it because he's the first U.S. Pope? Is that why it's bothering them?" I think you're spot on there. You saw Trump come out and say, "I like his brother. He's a MAGA guy," and the poor brother of the Pope actually got doxxed. I think he got swatted in the aftermath by MAGA voters, which says a lot about where we are. Just broaden it beyond the war. Where are we as a country right now in terms of Christianity in our public space and in politics right now? Because right now I'm looking at a Republican Party which doesn't seem to practice much Christianity in terms of kind of the social political tenets, but loves to talk about it, loves to talk about it as an identity, as a national identity. We're hearing a lot about Christian nationalism. Pete Hegseth's pastor, Doug Wilson, is doing a media tour right now, openly talking about Christian nationalism. What do you make of that? Do you worry about that?
Absolutely. It is, in some cases, being weaponized, I think. It is being used to sort of justify violence, of course. And again, it is used to talk about us versus them, right? And not only us versus them in terms of who's Christian and who's not Christian, but us versus them in terms of who's American, who's not American, who's white, who's not, who's native born, who's not. So, and this is the opposite of Jesus's message. I mean, Jesus's message was reaching out to people on the margins, particularly those, who feel excluded or ignored or persecuted. This is who he's going out to. He's going out to people who are Roman centurions, who are Samaritan women, who are, people with leprosy. So it's the opposite. It's a kind of perversion of the Gospels to say that there's an us and them.
When you talk about Jesus in that way, and I actually wrote a piece many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, about the lefty Jesus and talking about the overlap between socialist tenets and Christianity, which you know well. A lot of people, a lot of conservative Christians get very upset and say you're bringing kind of political ideology into the Bible, into the church. And then, of course, you have the reality, which is Christianity now, especially in America, owned by the right, is kind of monopolized by the right. And even though what you just described is very progressive, fighting poverty, standing with orphans and the poor, free healthcare, the left hasn't embraced Christianity in the same way.
Well, it depends which part of the left. I mean, you could talk about a lot of progressive Catholics and, people who are in the Catholic worker. And, you look at all the bishops, and particularly the U.S. Bishops Conference, who have been very strong in terms of migrants and refugees. I think they've done a great job. So those are people, the Catholic leaders, the bishops, and I think the majority of Catholics in the United States, who listen to them, who actually are being pretty progressive and are sort of siding with the poor and the migrants. So I think.
Do you think this, and I know you've written extensively about the LGBTQ issue, do you think the gay rights and the abortion issue, the quote-unquote social issues, the family values issues, quote-unquote, kind of have come to just outweigh and overshadow the, let's call them social justice issues, the fight against poverty, the fight against homelessness? Is there a tension there when it comes to the Catholic Church's relationship with the American public, with the American political system?
Well, I think the tension is that no one party can sort of fully incorporate all the Catholic Church's position, right? So it's for life from conception to natural death, right? So there's the question of abortion, which the Democratic Party does not agree with, I would say. There's the question of migrants and refugees, which the Republican Party, broadly speaking, doesn't agree with. So there's no one political
and the death
party.
Penalty itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it is this sort of rock-ribbed, focus on human dignity, and that is not encompassed by any one party, which is why I think it's wrong to sort of sometimes import some of these political definitions, Republican, Democrat, left, right, which I understand what people are talking about. And that's why sometimes, the administration is in step with the Vatican and out of step with the Vatican.
On that note, Carl Butner, one of our subscribers, asked, do you think Catholic voters in the US are turning against Trump because of recent developments?
I don't know about that in terms of polls. I mean, the Catholic vote is no longer a monolith, right? There's Catholics vote. If you're a Catholic Republican, you vote Republican. If you're a Catholic Democrat, you vote Democrat, not what your bishop says. I do think, though, that this recent sort of spate of, I would say, disrespectful posts and comments has really shocked Catholics of all stripes, right? I'm hearing it from progressives and traditionalists. And again, your question earlier on, or one of your commenters' questions, why would he pick a fight with Catholics? I think my sense was that he was just responding out of emotion, having seen that 60 Minutes thing. Why would J.D. Vance do it is a different question. Because I don't think he was doing that out of emotion.
I think Donald Trump, you're right, is a very emotional, impetuous, reckless, narcissistic, thin-skinned individual. And J.D. Vance is a sycophant. Liking this video? Don't just watch. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism. So I think that's probably the simplest explanation. One of our attendees asks, what about Catholic Bishop Barron standing approvingly and smiling behind Trump as Paula White at the White House compared Trump to Jesus?
I would say I'm not going to critique Bishop Barron, but there were many people who found that surprising.
And I assume, I have to ask the question, please don't laugh, you reject all comparisons between Donald J. Trump and Jesus Christ?
I reject comparisons between Jesus Christ and anyone. People have called it blasphemous. That's sort of speaking ill against God's name. I think it's more idolatrous. The irony is, the first commandment is, you shall not have no gods. You shall have no gods before me. And this crowd who, professes their religiosity is basically going against the first commandment, which is more than a little surprising.
But it is a cult. I mean, the MAGA cult is, building golden statues of Trump. And of course, why would Trump post a picture of himself as Jesus when Paula White, his evangelical faith advisor, this crazy lady, is saying stuff like, you're like Jesus. I think she said in a video clip I saw the other day that disobeying Trump is like disobeying God. When you have those kind of people in your public space talking about Christianity, you can understand why some people are thinking, well, that section of the church that supports the GOP, that supports Trump, they're off. They're nuts.
Well, I think there's a tension here. For the Christian, the model of Jesus and Jesus's life provides a template for our understanding our lives. That's just all Christians, right? Life, death, resurrection, sacrifice. There are templates there, and Jesus is our model, for all of us. The difficulty comes when we identify ourselves too much with Jesus, that we can say we follow Jesus, our lives are led in conformity with Jesus's teachings, but we're not Jesus. Right. And that's the difficulty. And that's the line that was crossed. And that's the line that line that was crossed, I think, offended many people, not just Catholics. And again, you saw even some of President Trump's Christian supporters, vocal Christian supporters say this is too far.
But it's funny you say this is too far. I just find that rhetoric absurd because this is not the first time he's done this, right? Like some of us have longer memories. I know Americans have, the memories of goldfish for 8 seconds, but you go back to his first term and, remember holding the Bible upside down, going for that walkabout in the middle of all the rioting outside the White House, not even touching the Bible during the inauguration, selling Bibles with his name on, trying to profit off of the Bible. That was a bizarre thing he did as well. So many things. He was asked about what his favorite verse of the Bible is. He couldn't name anything. Like going back, I think he said, I am the king of the Jews and Lord of the world. He reposted some conspiracy theorist posts. He said a lot of stuff that should have upset Christians a long time ago.
That's accurate. I'm surprised why more people are not put off by some of these idolatrous comments. I think that, I can't get into people's minds, but my sense is they say, well, that's just who he is. We can't take him seriously. But again, particularly the image of him as Jesus, right, was really shocking for a lot of people. It really crossed the line. And again, it's any way you look at it, it is idolatrous.
I remember a year ago when Pope Francis died, he put out an AI image of himself as the next Pope. So he loves doing this kind of stuff. I do want to ask a broader question. I'm sure many of our subscribers watching wonder this, especially those living abroad and look at what's happening in the US. You have these conservative Christians. You have these Republicans who go on and on about Christianity defining their faith, their politics, their values. And yet this conservative Christian coalition has come behind Trump like no other Republican, not even Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, actual churchgoers, in Bush's case especially, born again, couldn't command the kind of support that Trump does. And you look at Donald Trump, a serial liar, a serial adulterer, on his third wife, cheated on her with a porn star, former casino owner. This is the guy that conservative Christians in America decided to make their hero, their leader. A lot of people around the world scratching their heads just don't understand it. How would you explain it to non-Christians who ask you about this?
I think that people are voting politically, not religiously. I think what his political stands mean more for even Christians than his religious beliefs, basically. So I think they're voting a certain way in terms of migrants and refugees, the economy, America first, those kinds of things. I don't think the religious issues are playing as much role as the political issues are. That's simply it.
There's a remarkable moment where the president of Iran put out a message last week expressing solidarity with the Pope, saying, we are insulted at how Donald Trump posted about Jesus because we love Jesus as Muslims, which we do as Muslims. A remarkable moment when the president of Iran is telling the Pope, we support you against the American Christian president. We have an attendee who asked, with all the holy war talk coming from this administration and the authoritarian nature of it, do you think that Muslim Americans should worry that they eventually will be rounded up and incarcerated like what happened to the Japanese in World War II?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over-opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain's Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over-Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over-opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Overopinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Overopinionated with Josh Scott. Well, he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com, because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com.
I'm not sure. I wonder if the population that's happening to, which is migrants and refugees, aren't the ones that need to be worried. I sometimes worry about transgender people, the language that's coming out. Let me ask you that. Do you worry about that happening to Muslims?
Unfortunately, yes, the normalization of Islamophobia by the Tommy Tubervilles and the Randy Fines and the kind of Andy Ogles. You look at I think Tuberville said last week, Islam's not a real religion. Like the rhetoric that's coming out from these people. And Randy Fine said, if I had to choose between a Muslim and a dog, I would choose a dog. Like that normalization of Nazi-esque anti-Muslim rhetoric. And I see liberals and Democrats not speaking out loudly enough to condemn it, which makes it even worse. I worry a lot as a Muslim father with 2 kids in America, wondering what kind of country this would be. So I worry so much about Christian nationalism. It's why I tell Muslim friends of mine who love the Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens of this and MTGs of this world because they're anti-Israel right now. I try and remind them that their vision of America does not really feature us, right? Christian nationalists don't really want anyone who's not a Christian white person in this country, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, Hindu. We're all in the same non-Christian boat from the perspective of Christian nationalists. And, I look at Pete Hegseth. He's got a tattoo not just of a Crusader cross and Deus Vult, but he's also got a tattoo in Arabic of kafir, non-believer. And you just think, we Muslims are in the crosshairs, very much so.
I think what's going on, I read a book a couple of years ago, many years ago, by Paul Fussell, the social critic, called Wartime. And one of the chapters is about the dehumanization of Japanese people, which led to their being interred in the camps, in California and then in the West. And you see that over and over again. You see it with Tutsis and Hutu, right? Cockroaches. You see it with Jews in Nazi Germany. And so what's been happening with particularly migrants and refugees, and then recently transgender people, is that they are portrayed as less than human, right? Early on, Donald Trump talked about migrants and refugees as animals,
yes,
right? And so what happens is, as you know very well, once you dehumanize people, you allow violence against them because they're not human beings, and they can be rounded up, they can be put into concentration camps. And so that's what's happening all over. So it's interesting you should say that I wasn't as aware of the anti-Muslim comments. I'm more focused myself because of my work on anti-migrant, anti-refugee, and anti-transgender. But I think across the board, anytime you're dehumanizing people, and to bring it back to the topic at hand, this is anti-Christian, and this is certainly anti-Catholic. And one of the things that we hear of Pope Leo and Pope Francis and all the popes before him in the modern age talking about was this identity of each individual as a beloved child of God and someone with infinite human dignity. So that's the main Catholic standpoint right now in terms of all these controversies.
And just coming back full circle to the war, when you hear Pete Hegseth saying, we will fight against those who deserve no mercy, what's your reaction to that?
Shockingly unchristian. Everyone deserves mercy. It is a complete perversion of the gospel. When Jesus sees people who are struggling, we hear I know your network is called Zeteo, right? It's a nice Greek word for to seek. Jesus in the Greek, Gospels are written in Greek. His splagnon is moved, his guts are moved. So in other words, and when we read in the English, his heart was moved with pity. What am I trying to say? He sees people who are struggling and he has mercy on them. That's everybody, right? So to say that people don't deserve mercy is as about unchristian as you could get.
So just before we wrap up, I do want to ask about this idea of mercy, because then going back to the Republican Christian coalition, you make a very good point when you say people are voting politically. I interviewed, oh man, I'm forgetting his name, Jim Wallace. Pastor Jim Wallace a few years ago, very progressive Christian pastor. And he made a very good point when people say evangelicals. And he taught me something that I've tried to stick to. He said, we talk loosely about evangelical support for Trump. He said, it's white evangelical support for Trump. He said, Latino and black evangelicals don't support Trump. And he said, the point being is, it's not the evangelical part that's supporting Trump, it's the white part. Race is a bigger factor than religion when it comes to some of this identity politics. Similarly, as you pointed out with the political positions on migration, etc. But even if I concede all of that, ultimately, though, these people who are supporting Trump, whether it's in Texas or wherever you want to go, Georgia, Alabama, they are church-going folks. They read the Bible. They know who Jesus is. And yet they can support such a vicious politics, one that, as you say, dehumanizes migrants, has children being pulled from their parents, has grandmothers being put in ICE detention facilities. How do you rationalize that as a Christian? I'm sure there must be, I know that's not your natural flock, but you must have come across such people in your lifetime. How do you engage with fellow Christians who take such an un-Christian, un-Jesus-like view?
Well, I mean, there are Christians and there are Christians. I mean, there's a great line from the Gospels where Jesus says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of God, but only those who do the will of my Father. So you can say we're Christian, but if you're not walking the walk and you're just talking the talk, then what does it really mean? So if you go to church, wonderful. I mean, there are church-going people. That's wonderful. I'm a church-going person too. But if you're not reaching out to those on the margins, if you're not forgiving, I mean, the larger issues of the law, being merciful, being compassionate, what are you doing? And again, that great line, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, enters the reign of God. Not everyone who says, in a sense, I am Christian, is really sort of acting that way. So that's always been the case.
But do you think it's worse now? I think there's like a vicious streak in MAGA Republicans. Let me give you an example for one of our subscribers. Iram Wine reminds us, while not Catholic, Pete Hegseth's pastor said James Tallarico, the Senate Democrat candidate in Texas, who himself is a very open Christian, he said he should die. He should be crucified with Christ. Shouldn't religious leaders, says Iram, of all denomination, say God can't be used to justify killing innocent people? I mean, this is insane rhetoric, calling for the death of a Democratic Senate candidate by a Christian pastor.
It is, and I think you're right. I think it is getting worse. I think in the last couple of years, it's been hate has been normalized. It's okay to hate people, and it is shocking to me. But again, this has been the case since the beginning of the church.
So Donald Trump is in a war in Iran. His ICE agents are still pulling people off the streets all over the country, detaining them in horrific conditions. A lot of people are losing hope. And I ask a lot of guests about how they keep hope alive. I ask a lot of non-religious secular guests. It's a great opportunity to ask a man of faith. When people say to you in these dark times, you just talked about the attacks on migrants and minorities, how do you keep hope alive?
By focusing on the resurrection, by remembering that, on Good Friday and Holy Saturday, the disciples were cowering behind closed doors because they thought nothing could change. And Easter Sunday shows us everything changes. Love is stronger than hate. Hope is stronger than despair. Nothing's impossible with God. And for a more contemporary look at that, we say, well, nothing can ever change. We have Pope Francis, who changed the church, and we have our first American Pope. So I look at, the fact that God could do anything and as a way of holding on to hope.
And our first American Pope, I should point out, has 84% approval rating, according to Pew. He's one of the most popular public figures in the world right now, including in the US. I think that's the real reason Trump picked a fight with him, because he can't stand anyone being more popular than him. Before I let you go, I did mention the book, Work in Progress. It came out recently. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's a memoir. What is the message you're trying to tell in your memoir to the American public?
Yeah, it's a story of my finding work with some crazy summer jobs growing up in the 60s and 70s, and then later on finding God as a Jesuit priest. I worked for GE for a while. And basically the message is that God can work in anybody's life, whether you're a busboy, dishwasher, caddy, corporate executive, or even a Jesuit priest. So it's a kind of lighthearted spiritual memoir.
I urge everyone to get a copy. Reverend James Martin, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.